Welcome back to Pink is Power, a space for honest, heart-led conversation where science, soul, and lived experience always meet. Today's episode is one that feels deeply needed. We're speaking into perimenopause, not as something to be fixed or feared, but as a profound transition where the body begins to speak more clearly and the woman is invited to listen more deeply. This isn't a medical panel, just to say this to everyone listening. This is a whole woman conversation. Angela and I and our beautiful guests will be sharing our own lived experience, the physical changes, the emotional waves, the identity shifts, the moments of confusion, grief, strength, and awakening that came with this season of life. And we are so honored to be joined by two really incredible women. I'm so excited for it, who will support and deepen the conversation in a very different but beautiful, complementary and very profound way, because I know both you so well. Our first beautiful guest is Imrie Southcombe. Imrie is a holistic facilitator and guide whose work is grounded in nature, presence, and embodied wisdom. She weaves together life coaching, shamanism, energy healing, yoga, and meditation to create spaces that nurture clarity, acceptance, self-trust, and a deeper connection to one's true self. Supporting women to reclaim their intuition, their voice, and their inner strength is at the heart of her work, and she brings a deeply intuitive, soulful lens to this conversation. Our second beautiful guest is Rachel Jackson, who joins us as an expert in women's hormonal health through the lens of Ayurveda. Rachel trained as an Ayurvedic and lifestyle therapist with the European Institute of Vedic Studies. I think I said that correctly. If you need to correct me, Rachel, you're welcome. Vedic studies, and completed advanced clinical studies in Ayurveda in India, including hands-on with, here we go, Pachakarma. Yay! Her work is rooted in helping women understand their sacred natural cycle, empowering them with knowledge about their hormones, their bodies, and how to return to balance by working with the body rather than against it. Rachel also brings intuitive and energetic insight into her practice, bridging hormonal health with the energy, body, and chakra system. The way this conversation will unfold is simple and intentional. Angela and I, alongside with Imrie, will just open it up and we'll offer just reflections and our own embodied wisdom. And then we will invite the beauty of Rachel's wisdom in and allow her the opportunity to respond with the educational insight, some practical understanding to support and empower women listening. So, if you're in perimenopause or menopause, approaching it, or simply wanting to understand your body more deeply, this conversation is for you. Take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Welcome, ladies. So happy to have you all here. So, from that launch into the space, who's feeling connected into wanting to speak from that personal place of share?
I don't mind starting, Karen and Angela, if that's okay.
Yeah.
This is
Oh, yeah,
Anne-Marie's gift.
absolutely.
So thank you, first of all, for inviting me or giving me this opportunity to speak about something that I do feel quite passionate about. And just to reiterate, I'm going to be speaking just from my own personal experience. I'm not an expert in this, except for I've lived it. I'm living it. So I guess in that way, I do have my own experience to draw from. And yeah, so I just for context, I am 52 now, and I guess I've been navigating this journey for the last few years, consciously and unconsciously. I think it was there unconsciously, or maybe I just didn't really know what was going on for a good while before it really landed with me that, oh, this is it. This is perimenopause. This is menopause. This is this journey that I'm on. But maybe to start with, I'll just talk about the first signs that showed up for me. And of course, I'm looking at this from hindsight, which gives us great perspective. But at the time, I didn't really maybe know what was going on. But the first thing that I noticed was my cycle started to change in my early 40s. And I had been tracking my cycle for many years, but I didn't like it had started becoming more frequent. So going from maybe a 28 to 30-day cycle to then kind of 24, 25 days. And it didn't happen all at once. This happened very gradually. It wasn't really a big deal. I didn't really give it that much time or attention. It was just something that happened. And then as I kind of went into my late 40s, my cycle became even more frequent. And then there were more maybe effects of my cycle, like my sleep pattern became more disturbed. I was having more restless nights or more wakefulness. I was needing to get up and pee. That was something I never had to do before, aside from maybe when I was pregnant, but otherwise it was not something, I heard about people needing to get up and pee. I wasn't one of them. So, but I did become one of those women who had to get up and pee. Not very often, but still something that I had to do that was new for me at the time. Um, and another thing that I noticed, again, probably mid to late 40s, and it was a gradual thing, but I started to put on weight, and that was something I never had to really um deal with. Like I was very lucky that my weight didn't fluctuate that much as I was, navigating adulthood, but it was like I just started putting on weight, and how the weight was distributed in my body felt different. It just didn't sit in the same way as it did before, and I can't even really articulate it. It was just more of a feeling. It was like I had more weight around my belly, and it just felt different. How my clothes started to fit felt different. There were some clothes that didn't fit me anymore, but even the clothes that did fit me, they didn't fit me in the same way, and they didn't look the same way. And even though that again it was quite subtle, all of this was quite subtle. It didn't happen all at once. It gradually built up over time. But when you look back on it, it's a huge change. My energy changed. I had less energy. I had less tolerance. My bullshit meter went from 0 to 100 very quickly at times. I couldn't tolerate bullshit. I just, excuse the language, but I
I
couldn't.
love it.
I
Love it.
couldn't deal with it. Um, but the flip side was that I became more quiet. I became more introverted. I have an introvert aspect to my personality anyway, but that became more it just became more how I was. And I had less confidence, self-doubt started to come up, and fear. Fear became like I started to get fearful of things I was never fearful of, like silly things, but yet it just started taking up more space in my head. I started to doubt myself. I started to question myself more. I started getting brain fog and forgetfulness and distraction, and I just wasn't able to do what I used to be able to do. And that was kind of quite disconcerting. I also feel it's quite important as well to say that there are people who don't maybe have all these experiences, and there might be people who breeze through perimenopause and menopause. And I'm really just speaking from my own experience, but I feel like it's important to share because I didn't know, I didn't expect all of this when I first landed in this stage. And probably the biggest and hardest thing to deal with was the anxiety and the fear that came up for me at the time. And something that I'm still navigating, even now. But that was probably the worst thing because it came up out of nowhere. It was like, yeah, I'd wake up in the morning and within seconds of opening my eyes, I was flooded with anxiety. And I remember lying in bed going, why do I have that? What is this here? Like, why is this here? What's this here for? And sitting with it. And I've done a lot of sitting with my stuff. I've done a lot of that over the years. And yet I couldn't pinpoint a reason for it. There wasn't always a reason for it, but yet it was there, and it was kind of crippling to some degree, and it would last throughout the day. So yeah, it was quite intense. Um, yeah, and before I realized, in my late 40s, I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely perimenopause and menopause, like preparation for menopause. But in my early 40s, I kind of knew I was in transition, but I didn't connect two and two. I had this underlying feeling that I was in transition. I even remember somebody asking me about something at the time and just saying, like, I just feel like I'm in a transition. I don't really know what it's about, but I just feel I'm in a transition. I couldn't put my finger on what was it? What was this transition about? Was it work? Was it life? Was it what was it? But looking back, I can safely say that was part of the perimenopause journey. Um, yeah, so would you like me to speak more about the emotional or psychological effect?
Please, no,
Yeah.
please, because when I sat with you and you were sharing, like, I was deeply touched by the level of insight you were able to articulate and speak to. Like, for me, you were naming things that I was unconsciously unaware were connected into this spectrum of the perimenopause. So, like, for me, it's like whatever you feel called to genuinely share, I know it's just going to be like that beautiful torch in the darkness for someone else's coming into understanding this within themselves. So absolutely, please, whatever you want, Emery. Yeah.
Okay. So, I think maybe I didn't know a lot about perimenopause and menopause before I was really and truly in it. I knew about hot flushes. I knew about the cycle changes. I knew that, you'd end up with like less and less periods maybe, or more time between bleeds. But there was a lot I didn't know. I didn't really know about the sleep. I didn't know about the brain fog. I didn't know about the energy shift. I didn't know about that it was such a big transition. Like it's like, again, this is my experience. It's like everything has fundamentally changed in me as a person. Everything. Like my body doesn't operate, it feels like it doesn't operate the same way as it did before. And I didn't know to expect any of that. So, yeah, that was probably quite hard to navigate. Like, in 2020, actually, I can't really put dates in it, but like, when I was navigating this at the early stages, people were still only beginning to start talking about perimenopause and menopause. Like, it's still fairly, this topic of conversation is still fairly new. Um, so yeah, so I knew about hot flushes, but I didn't know about all the other things. And I think one of the things that I had shared with you, Karen, when we were talking about this previously, is this, there was a couple of things. One was this subtle and yet tangible energetic shift in how I was being perceived or how I felt like I was being perceived by the world. It was like I was not being seen in the same way as I was before. It was almost like I was being slightly dismissed, or like my voice didn't carry weight anymore, that what I was saying didn't land with people in the same way, that I was kind of slightly been disregarded. And it's not even, I can't even come up with examples. It was just something that I noticed. I can't tell whether that was something I was just feeling within myself and this was my own perception of what was going on around me, or is there actually a shift that people can perceive? And my sense is that yes, there probably is. Um, and then the other thing that I talked to you about, Karen, before was the this burn the house down moment, which I didn't burn my house down for anybody that's thinking, what? It's just I had this rage that came up. And it's like the only way I can describe it is it felt very justified. It felt almost like this sacred, holy rage that I felt justified in having. And it's like the mask had been taken away from my eyes and I could see what was really going on in the world. And I couldn't pretend that everything was okay anymore. I just couldn't pretend that everything was fine. And I was angry about it. I was angry about it. And I felt justified in that anger. And it's not just in how women are or the fact that I was going through this menopause journey or perimenopause journey and nobody could understand why I'm being so neurotic. It wasn't just related to that. It was also what was happening in the world at large and kind of how some of the stuff that's happening does not need to be happening and shouldn't be happening. So this rage was and still is there. But I'm more used to it now, so I guess I better have a bit more containment over it. And just the tolerance, like I had said previously, the tolerance level had reduced so much. It was just like I was putting up a hand and saying no, no. And sometimes there wasn't even an explanation. It was just no. The answer is just no. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. Whatever it was. Might have been something really small. I remember at times my husband, who is incredibly supportive, but looking at me at a total loss because I knew I was behaving kind of neurotic and intense and moody and maybe a little bit crazy. And maybe overreacting, but yet about something that was very real to me at the time, but yet maybe my reactions were much bigger than they used to be before, or much more intense. And the poor man looking at me going, I just don't even know what to say to you right now, And I wouldn't have known what to say to me at that time either. So there was this underlying feeling of betrayal. And I know that's quite a strong word, but it's a word that really aptly describes how I was feeling. It was like I was being betrayed by my body in some ways because my body was now very different to how it was before. I could see the signs of aging, but it's like things, even though they were happening subtly, it's like it kind of also happened quite quickly. Like my skin, my hair became drier. It's like there was less luster and, less vitality. I could feel my youthfulness. This sounds awful to say, but it's almost like I could feel the youthfulness diminishing a little bit. I didn't feel sexy. I didn't feel like I had any sex appeal or attraction. And, my clothes didn't fit. Like I didn't know what to wear. How do I work with this body that is different than how it was like a couple of years previous, like not even that long? So, yeah, and then my mind and the fears that were coming up and the lack of confidence and the self-doubt, and I became nervous driving, like things that I would never have worried about before. Do you know all these things? And it was just confusing. And there was a lot of grief. There was so much grief that came up around this sense of loss that I had about who I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. I just was changing. And even though it was happening over a few years, it felt like it was happening very intensely and very quickly, and I didn't really know what to do about it or how to be. And there's not really anything that you can do or be. Do you know what I mean? You just have to kind of to some degree go with it.
How
Um,
did you go with it? Like, what was it that, because you're talking about it like it's in past tense. Is it in past tense for you? And is it what changed for you if something did change? I'm curious.
Okay, so some of it is past tense. I thought I was finished with my cycle. And actually, this is not just related to the bleed because even I thought I had finished with my cycle. And yet, the transition, the shift that is perimenopause and menopause can continue even after the cycle finishes. I know that from experience. And also, I got a bleed recently, so I'm not finished. I'm not, I haven't reached menopause yet, even though I thought I had. Anyway, so some of it is definitely past tense. And I'm aware, actually, even through preparing to do this podcast, I'm like, oh gosh, some of this is actually past tense. So for anybody who is going through the depths of the intensity in the moment that they're in, it's to know that things do shift. They absolutely do shift. That sense of betrayal is less now. There are some times when I feel like I'm right back in it, but most of the time now, it's like I have come to know who I am now. I'm not the same person as I was before. I am definitely changed, and not all in a bad way. Like I definitely have found my voice, and which I felt like I had lost for a good while. And my voice is different than how it was before. Um, so yes, some of it is past tense and some of it is very real depending on the moment that I'm in. Do you know, I still have those moments where I just feel angry or I still have sense of grief, but I'm at peace. I'm more at peace with it now. So yeah, I can feel that I have moved through some of it to some degree. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. It really does answer my question. And it sounds like, you did it with such dignity and bravery throughout it as well. Just finding your voice, as you've said, getting to that place in your life. Did you seek any kind of support? I know your husband was, but did you seek any kind of means of support to get you through it? Or was it just one foot in front of the other? What was that like for you?
So yeah, initially like I kind of was doing it on my own. A lot of shame came up because because my body was, from for other people, it might not have been obviously changing. For me, it was changing so radically. My internal world was changing so radically. It was like my shadow self was coming up left, right, and center, and I was being hugely confronted by that. And a lot of shame came up with that. A lot of confusion came up with that. Like it's a total identity crisis. At least that's what it was like for me. So I didn't know where I was. I actually it was hard to find myself within all of this. So it was really hard to talk about to anybody. To be quite honest, at the start, it was really hard to talk about it to anybody. And on a more personal side, there was a lot going on with my family. My father was very sick at the time. He has since passed, but at the time he was very sick, and my kids were teenagers. Like I didn't want to lean on anybody in that way because there was so much going on, do you know? My kids needed their mother, and I was, trying to show up as their mother, which of course, once you're a mother, you're always a mother. But I was trying to show up for them in the way that I did before. And of course, I had to also pull back and everything. So what I did do, so this would have been during, those awful periods of time during lockdowns and stuff. So I did a lot of online courses for women. Some of them would have included menstrual cycle awareness. I still had a regular bleed at the time. I got really into tracking my cycle. That was hugely beneficial. I would highly recommend it to everybody. So I did that, and then there were other courses that I did that weren't specifically for the cycle, but were very supportive in for women, and some of them had what's called listening partnerships. So even though I didn't have anybody locally who I could talk to, or who I felt like there was probably loads of people I could talk to, but who at the time I didn't feel like I could reach out. So I had this group, there were three of us in the group, and they were called Listening Partnership, and we would meet online regularly, like once every 2 weeks or once a month, just to talk about whatever it was that we were feeling about anything. It wasn't just to do it perimenopause, but that was really, really helpful. And then I also signed up for a course called Menopause, the Great Awakener, which is run by Red School. And that's a course that they run every year around the time of November. And I did that course for the first time in 2020. I wasn't really ready for it because I wasn't far enough along in my journey, but I've been doing it every year since, and I've just finished it this year. And I have to say, it's hugely helpful because it reframes menopause, it reframes the journey as a spiritual evolution, and it talks about the different phases that we go through. And it's hugely helpful because, there are some narratives out there that kind of would lead you to believe that, it's a problem that we go through menopause, whereas actually I don't think it's helpful to think of it that way. More like something that we're meant to go through. It's like an evolution into our wise years. So that was also very helpful. And then lastly, but not least, I did end up going to the doctor in, 2022, and the doctor put me on HRT, and that has also been helpful. Although honestly, I've had some conflict in my system come up around that as well. So, and it's probably just because of the background that I'm in with the holistic well-being side of things. It's like I wouldn't have really leaned on medication. So, that's been a transition for me to navigate as well. But honestly, at the time, the anxiety was through the roof. And something that I didn't know is that your heart can also be affected with the symptoms of perimenopause. I've had my heart fully checked out. It's perfectly fine, but I was having this fluttering or arrhythmia, which is really disconcerting. So that was the final straw. I was like, do you know what? Why am I choosing to suffer through this? I need some help here. So that's the support that I leaned on. And it doesn't make everything okay. Life still happens. Menopause still happens. The energy of menopause is still there, even if you're having a little bit of help. But it does help the other symptoms, especially if there's things going on in your life and you just need a little bit of help. So yeah.
Thank you, Imrie. I mean, like for me, when I listen to it, it stirs in my heart the sacredness of the wisdom of women when we come and just even sit here in this format together and share, like you shared, and everything you said, all of us were collectively nodding our heads, recognizing, understanding it. I could see Rachel was writing notes, so I can't wait to hear what Rachel was doing there. But for me, listening to you, it allows me to truly appreciate the woman essence of the feminine, and the sacredness of a woman and the journey of a woman. I mean, I grew up with a mother. She had a hysterectomy when she was only 42, so there was no conversation of her going through menopause. So I felt very like leaning into the information out there, which was not a lot of information out there, you know. So a lot of what you said, I really could connect into and relate to in a deep way. And then also to bring in the beauty of non-shaming, like everybody is going to go on a path with themselves with this based on the consciousness and the educational understanding that they have, you know. And I just want to say, like, you know, there's nothing wrong with whatever path we go down. And I love that you own that for you, saying you did the HRT and then there's a part of you, you know, going, oh God, with the background that I have. And, you know, there's a place and a time for everything, you know. And when you, and I've noticed with me, when I become more informed and connected into things, because the nature of my spirit is I love to know things in a very spiritual way, and that's just the nature of my spirit. My spirit will look for, will listen to it medically, scientifically, 3D language, but then I will go off myself and I have to hunt down the wisdom, the mystical and the spiritual wisdom and things. It's just the nature of my soul. You know, it won't, that can't turn off on me. So, which then absolutely led me into the work with Rachel. Angela, before I move into the beautiful work of what Rachel does and maybe what Rachel would love to speak to, do you have anything you want to offer into the space in your own personal journey with this as well?
Yeah. I just want to say to Anna Marie, thank you so much for, sharing your story. Really resonated with me. I could really connect with that, a lot of what you said. So what I thought was lovely was that we're here together, a group of women. Wouldn't it be amazing if a group of women could get together regularly around this stage of their lives and just even listening to each other? There's so much support in that alone because you don't feel so alone. When I started to experience perimenopause, my oldest son had started secondary school. So I thought I was just overwhelmed with him starting secondary school. And I remember saying to somebody, I don't know, maybe it's perimenopause. And they were like, but don't think you'd be experiencing that right now. And then I went to a one doctor in the clinic and they kind of said, no, you're probably quite young for it at the minute. And then I said, no. I'm not. This would be the age where it would be quite dominant. And I know this from a pharmacist who told me there's girls 10 years younger than me that are getting this and feeling this experience. So I said, it's not an age thing, it's a feeling. And then I went back and I made an appointment with a female doctor who would be more of an expert at the time in hormones. And I kind of said to her, I think I am. And then I said, you know what? But I think I'll go and I'll track how I'm feeling. So I wanted a journal and kind of monitor how I was for a few months. And I would journal around that to kind of come to that decision, what was going on for me. But a big part of what was going on for me was I wasn't sleeping. So I kind of started to notice insomnia, waking up in the middle of the night and being really wired and not being able to get back asleep. My cycle was still normal and still regular. So I had no issues there. It was still on time. It was the same as it had been. Um, but what I noticed as well was I started to lose the pleasure in food. For me was it was so weird. It was like the idea of putting some physically into my mouth would just make me feel sick. So I constantly felt like I knew I needed to eat, but I didn't really have any appetite, and I was eating just to obviously survive and get through the day. So I was eating like scrambled eggs and porridge. They were the only things that I could eat. So I actually lost a lot of weight around that time, and I was walking a lot because my anxiety was so high. So I was out walking so much every day, up and down, up and down. And I could go for 2 walks a day, anything to kind of, and I knew the anxiety wasn't mine in a way because like you had said, like I've done the work on myself as a psychotherapist now, but also having to train as one. During that you have to be in therapy. So I was doing the work on myself. I was meditating, so I had kind of I've done the deep dive for years on myself. I know myself in such a deep way. So I knew also this wasn't all mine, that this was pure. It felt chemical. It felt like there was a lot going on in my body and I didn't feel like I had control over all of it. And I just felt I started to lose weight. Physically, when I looked at pictures of myself, if I look back at them now, I probably looked the best I have in a long time at the start of this, because I was, I looked well, like in one way, but I didn't. I felt so unattractive. I felt so ugly. I would look at myself and I would hate what I would see looking back at me at that time. And I remember saying to my husband, Stephen, And we talked about this went on for a few weeks, or and then probably into a few months, probably about 3 months, the 3 month mark. And I felt, because we're like, I'm so crazy about him and like I love him. But I started to feel a disconnect. I started to feel like I don't, there was that part of me going, oh, why am I feeling disconnected? I didn't want anybody else. It wasn't me suddenly casting my interest anywhere else. It was purely around that time I was going, oh, I'm not as into anything right now. That's what it was feeling. I just felt a complete disconnect. And I was saying, this is not good. This is not me. So that was a big eye opener for me, kind of being so aware of how I was feeling and kind of tapping into that. And just the lack of appetite and no pleasure in food anymore. And like not, I dreading having to eat. And like it wasn't an eating disorder. I wanted to not have this. It was making me miserable having this experience that my pleasure in food was gone, because I love my food. I like, going out for meals. I like all of that. That was going on for a long time. I had no pleasures. And, then it was the self-esteem. It was that kind of, you talked about it, that sense of self, Anne-Marie, and that's how I felt. Like my identity, everything was like, it just wasn't, I just didn't feel connected anymore. I just felt very alone, less than, very unattractive, all of those things. I just felt meh all the time. And that went on for a few months. And then Stephen was amazing. I remember just sitting down with him one night and crying and crying and crying. The kids had gone to bed. I was like, oh, I can't cope with this. This is awful. I just really having a good cry. And he was amazing. I'd gone to bed that night. He stayed up for hours afterwards, doing loads of research, finding every supplement, every treatment that man could get me. He spent hundreds. And I got up the next day and he goes, now I'm going to show you. I have a whole plan for you. And he had a whole layout of everything to help me. So I did avail of all of that. He was amazing. And I took on all these beautiful treatments and everything that this amazing man could do for me, I was taking. But I still wasn't feeling that change. I still couldn't get past this feeling of I just wasn't enough. And like I talked to my therapist about, Stephen was like, you're more than enough. I mean, I had all of those things going on, but it was like, I don't know, it was like the light had gone off up there. Something had changed, and I suddenly felt like I was this invisible person in the world. And it didn't matter what my husband said to me, it didn't matter. All like you talked about fears. There was all those fears. It was like everything intensified in my life in that moment. And it was like, and it was all about being left behind, this real feeling of being left behind, that I just wasn't enough. And it was an awful feeling, an awful place to be in. And then I just went, you know what? I've journaled for a few months. I've taken all these supplements. They're definitely helping in a bit. I started to get a bit of my appetite back. So there was definitely that part. But I still felt I couldn't, but also my thought process wasn't great. I mean, I was very insecure. So it's like everything around that time, anything that came in and kind of tampered with that in my life, like, when I think about stuff that would have bothered me then around that time, I now know logically that that's not even something that would bother me now. But I was so bothered by things that I wouldn't be bothered by now. And that wasn't good. And I knew I couldn't live like that. I was like, when is this going to end? It's never going to end. And you know what? I have two older sisters. And I said to them, I said, I'm going to the doctor. And I said, I know you don't take. And they're older than me. And I said, I'm taking hormones. And they're like, you don't need them yet. I said, I don't care. I'm getting hormones. And when I went to the doctor, she said to me, you are suffering terrible symptoms of perimenopause. She said, it sounds like you're really having a tough time. And I was like, I am having such a tough time. Actually, I hate taking painkillers. I don't take any, like, I am so, like Karen will tell you, like, I'm the last person to take medication. I'm very like, I like all my natural stuff. So this for me was like, I couldn't see any help that was going to help me get to where I am. And in the end, maybe it was the easy way out. I don't know, but I took the HRT, and within a few weeks, I'm telling you, it was like all the lights went back on in my life. I hadn't felt a joy like it in the first few weeks. I was thinking, this is how people that run, I don't know, big companies or whatever, people that feel so untouchable, that's how I felt. I was so happy. I don't think I've ever felt that happy ever. So this was a first for me. It was like the serotonin was being pumped through my body or whatever from the estrogen. Everything was like coming back on. My confidence shot through the roof again. It was like within months, everything. My skin started to look better, and my hair started to seem to thicken up. Everything started to change, and I was like, my sex life was always good, but by God, it was tenfold. All of these different things happened, and I felt like I've never felt more confident again in my life, actually more confident. So I went through absolutely a transition of like hating myself and not liking myself to having to deal with that. And then get to the other side and take I wish I have the conflict too. I have the exact same conflict. There's this part of me that every time I take it and every time I don't. But then my mother died from sudden adult death syndrome at 53. So like most of her siblings had heart related deaths, like stuff like that sudden. So a big thing for me was my heart, and that was a big thing as well. I was thinking, Jesus, my mother had entered menopause. She'd just entered menopause around that stage. I remember that. And then she died, in her sleep. So I was thinking, that was part of the reason as well. Cancer wasn't a big concern in my family, breast cancer, any of those things. That wasn't something. Whereas a heart trouble is. My father had, massive heart attacks, so there was all of these things coming from the heart. So. For me, it felt like I can take this now. And I remember my sister going to me, would you not wait until you're actually in menopause in your 50s or whatever and go on this thing, And I said, why would I wait for the next feckin' whatever, and then spend all these years being miserable because I miss out on the best times of my life. I'm taking this now. And to be honest with you, I Stephen, who wasn't really at first into HRT, he was just like trying to do all the natural stuff for me. It's someone passed a comment the other day because he takes all the natural stuff now from men. Like he'll be all natural. He's more natural than me. But someone said, and would you come off it? Because you could go on that. And I said, you know what? I have thought about it. And he looked at me. He said, I think she's doing great. I think she should stay as she is
Don't
because
change her.
don't change her. So look I have to say, and you know what? I can work out 5 times a week now. I can do stuff that I couldn't do. Really, I have a strength back in. I have all those things. So you know what? I'm grateful that taken the body identical hormones, that I am at a really good stage in my life. I know it's not for everybody and it doesn't work for everybody. Had somebody able to probably at the time give me the same return in something else, then that would have worked too. But I felt like that was the approach I needed to take, but I don't regret it. And I feel amazing. And I like myself now. I like what I see. And I knew, I was like, this shit's so chemical. Although Rachel will probably tell me different. There's probably something else that I'm missing. So you'll probably go, no, Angela, you could have done this. But I'm open to it all. But at the same time, I feel like me. I feel like I'm in my 20s again. I swear to God, that's how I feel. But even my skin looks better. Everything looks better than it did. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the owl estrogen and progesterone. So I'll let you talk now, Rachel.
I'll bring you in beautifully. So don't, I suppose I'll just add my experience very gently there. Um, yeah, I've had the sleepless nights and that, but what I've never had is the emotional or mental conflict. I've never experienced that. I don't know if it's going to come, but at the same time, there is a way in which I am with myself because of we all know my incredible having to do the shit at a very young age. But I've learned from, like all of you have named from the self-inquiry work, I've learned from a very young age to really sit in the discomfort of very difficult emotions. So psychologically, emotionally, and physically, I'm able to breathe under immense discomfort. I always find the sanctuary of myself within the discomfort. And I feel that that served me. Now, what also served me is I went through a lot of external craziness where a 14-year relationship ended, transition out of chaos into finding myself. So I went through a genuine, wonderful awakening based on external environmental situations that just devastated my world. And then I fell in love. So while I was going through perimenopause, I found a great love. I fell in love. Everything was fresh, everything was new. So all those, and I had incredible, from 2020 up till now, I've had incredible life experiences that have happened. I've traveled all across America, touring with books, speaking on stages in America, connecting with celebrities and that. So my life really took off in a big, big way when perimenopause kicked in. So when I started to get the symptoms, I ran to Rachel. I discovered Rachel through a beautiful friend that's already in her beautiful care. When I started to find my body was getting hotter at night, and I would notice I would sleep with my feet out of the blanket to cool down the body, I said, I'm not going to fight my body on this. I want a journey with my body. I want my body to take me where it's needing to go. And I go with the body rather than looking at the body going, oh, I'm resistant. What's going on? What's different? So when I sat with you, Rachel, for me, because as I named, the nature of my spirit is I need to look into this world with a very lens that I find for me, if it gives me expansion over the situation, I can then hover in a very kind of contained way with the situation. So when I met you, Rachel, and the first thing I learned from you, which really, really made me go, awe of self, just to name it and frame it to you like that. I developed that awe of my body and myself when I learned about even the period and the bleed, and the way you describe that to me, how it's like little hunter and gatherers will go all around the body and they're taking the energy, they're detoxing you from the people you were around, from the food you've been taking in, from the environments you've been in. So when you bleed, that is such a great sacred thing. I never knew that. Like, I never knew that about period. I would have been on contraception to stop myself from having a period when I was like late teens, because I used to get them very bad. And I came off of, in my late 30s, I came off of any contraception. I just wanted to be natural in my body. So when I was learning all of this from you, I was like, I've never looked at the body as having this sacred intelligence and it knows what it's doing. It actually knows. It is this incredible designer. It was, if I was to metaphorize the body, it is like the divine in action, knowing what it's doing for us, and it's formulating into something extraordinary. And our little psyche in where we're at can't even comprehend where we're heading in terms of that formulation. So when I came to you and I did the seed cycling with you, every symptom stopped. I push seed cycling onto everyone like I'm a dealer. You need to do seed cycling. You need to do seed cycling. And people are like, what's that? And then I tell them and it sounds too simple that people are like, really? That works? And I'm like, I have no symptoms. I have no symptoms. I have no joint pain. I have no stiffness. I have no symptoms that way. I wake up during the night, and what I've done when I wake up at 3 in the morning at my ego hour, I get up now and I just write. I write, I meditate, and I go back to bed. But I've set up my life, because I work for myself, that if I go back to bed at about 4 and I feel ready to sleep again, I'm not getting up to anything, because I have organized my own day. I'm in control of the rhythm of my life, which is phenomenal, to be in control of the rhythm of your own life. I think, Imrie, you're also self-employed, and I know Rachel is, and Angela will be as well. But when you have control over the rhythm of your life, wow, like that to me is medicine already there. So for me, coming into perimenopause, I came into it when the situation or the setup of my environment actually was very complementary to my evolution. I found an incredible partner that I married, great love for the last 5 years. I got out. Had I still been with, God forgive me, the other partner, I think my symptoms would have been reflective of the struggle in that relationship. My symptoms would have been more amplified and magnified if I was still in that rhythm that I was in. And I'm not saying it is that, but for me, that's what it feels like. It feels like the very thing that's deep in the body that needs to be known comes up to be known in this growth out of. And then I go into that place where I'm like, okay, this womb is not just a physical space in our body, it is an energetic portal. And when we stop bleeding, instead of giving our life energy out into the world, where is that life energy? That's coming back up into my body, and it's going into places and spaces in my own being. So for me, I feel, wow, when this shuts down and my bleed stops into the world, now all of that energy is in my body for Karen. Like that's going to be for me, and I'm at an age where I'm 47. I know, Imrie, your children are very similar age as mine. Like my son is 28 and my daughter is 20. So that too has also supported the journey in this. They're not like small like Angela's kids would be. They're not small and needing me. Like I have space to be in my discomfort, my unsettling energy. So, Rachel, I'd love to move into you now after all that you've heard and what we've spoken to. And I would love to hear your beautiful lens on this and into this.
Oh, there is so much. There is just so much I would love to unpack and to get into. And there was so much beautiful information shared and so much that resonated with my own personal experience, so much of what I see and hear when I work with other women. So there is something incredibly powerful about this conversation because there were so many. I was writing down because I wanted to keep track of the similarities of the same theme that I have experienced and that what Angela and Anne-Marie were sharing, the similarities of what happens for women when they move through this transition. So I think for me, what I'll do is I'll answer to some of the physical symptoms that were described. So hot flashes were mentioned, weight gain were mentioned, uh, sleep, of course, is a major one. The cycle change, so having a change in your menstrual cycle, the self-doubt, the fear, the anxiety, even Emery, when you mentioned the rage, I just thought that that was so powerful. So but if we start with just the physical, if I just hone in on just the physical, which would be the change in the cycle, which would be the brain fog, which would be the weight gain, less energy, joint pain, any of those physical symptoms. Now, there are two ways that I could look at this. I could give you a strict Ayurvedic lens, okay, but I'm going to mix it up a little bit and I'm going to use a bit of Western science terminology because I think that that is more easily digestible and translatable. The one thing that I would hope, or the one thing that I would really wish to get across, which I don't think always gets across for women, is that this transition through perimenopause and menopause is not just a hormonal transition, it's a metabolic transition. Your gut is just as affected as your hormones, and there is a deep relationship between what goes on in the microbiome as there is with your hormones. So for me as an Ayurvedic therapist, I always start with correcting as best as I can the function of the microbiome. Because this is not just a hormonal event, it's a metabolic event. Your microbiome is being deeply affected. And the thing to know about the microbiome is that your health of the gut is related to your estrogen metabolism. So if you really want to get good results from whatever it is that you're doing, whether that's taking supplements or whether that is HRT or whether or not you're doing an all-natural approach, whatever you are doing, you are not going to get 100%, I don't want to say 100%, but the results that you do get will only be quadrupled, amplified, will only be so much more powerful if you also work on your gut. Because this is, like I said, it's not a hormonal transition. This is a transition that deeply affects the health of your microbiome. This also means that however your gut has been functioning from the ages, especially from 35 onwards, so from the ages to 35 to 45, whatever state your gut was in prior to perimenopause or menopause is going to have a huge influence on what your experience of perimenopause and menopause is. Okay, so a lot of women don't see that there is something that they can actually do to prevent symptoms before they technically go into perimenopause and menopause, and that is to work on their microbiome. I would advocate starting at age 35, minimum. So this isn't, for me, my frustration in this talk around perimenopause or menopause is my personal frustration as a therapist, is that we're not talking enough about how the microbiome, what we can do to treat it, what we can do to make it better. You see, the enzymes in your gut determine whether or not your estrogen is reabsorbed into circulation or eliminated through waste. And so much weight gain, for example, is a symptom of estrogen dominance. So this weight that we're gaining in all the weirdest places, and we're not for sure what to do with it, that has to do with not being able to metabolize estrogen correctly. That goes back to what's going on in the microbiome and especially your liver. So there, for me, it's like if we start to include, because a lot of times when we look at perimenopause and menopause, the hormones get isolated. Let's treat estrogen, or let's treat progesterone, or let's treat them, we'll just focus on the hormones themselves. We don't look at the body as a whole. We don't look at the relationship between the systems. We don't look at the relationship between the digestive system and hormone production. We don't look at the relationship, for example, between the liver and detoxing estrogen. We don't look at the relationship between the nervous system and our hormone production. So there, for me, when we talk about perimenopause and menopause, we're isolating the hormones like they work in isolation, but they don't. It's far more complicated than that. Hormones affect every single tissue in our body. When it gets to some of the other things that were named, I just want to, and then I'm going to switch into more of the Ayurvedic terminology. Our microbiome, or the health of our gut, influences our neurotransmitters as well. This includes our production of serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. So when women start to feel low self-esteem, they no longer feel good about themselves. They no longer feel confident. They no longer feel sexy. They no longer feel attractive. Well, those hormones that I mentioned, serotonin, dopamine, they're produced in the microbiome. So I'm going back to, if you treat your gut and not just focus on just the hormones, you're going to have a direct knock-on effect on your mood. When we look at sleep disturbance, GABA is the hormone that is required for deep, restful sleep. So when your your microbiome is going through this huge transition, which it will, because that is perimenopause and menopause, and if these hormones are disrupted in their production because the microbiome is now affected and maybe it's less effective, and this also has to do with somebody's personal history, for example, if they have a long history of being on medication long-term, for example, if they have ongoing infection, even a parasite infection, all of this has an impact on the microbiome. And then you throw in perimenopause or menopause, and then we have literally a house on fire. So these are things to look at when it comes in terms of mood, sleep, and even our ability to manage stress. So a lot of what was mentioned there was, like, for example, the anxiety. Well, serotonin and dopamine are feel-good hormones. They're our comfort blanket. They're our ability to feel like we're okay and everything is okay. You see, so if you take away the comfort, and then plus estrogen has a deep relationship with both serotonin and dopamine. So if you have an estrogen that's going up and down like on a roller coaster, it's high for sometimes, because estrogen doesn't just plummet. Estrogen actually goes on more of a roller coaster ride where it's high sometimes and then it's low sometimes and then it's high sometimes. And this is all tied into, again, how well are you metabolizing your estrogen? But estrogen as a hormone in itself is our feel-good hormone. Estrogen is the hormone that makes us feel confident, alive, attractive, beautiful, Like we feel creative. We feel like we're full of inspiration. We feel like we have something to offer to this world when our estrogen is working well. So for me, around perimenopause and menopause, so much more, we could give women so much more options if we were to include, well, let's look at the health of the gut. Let's look at what we can do to improve the microbiome. Let's look at what we can do so that we can actually start to manage and get better results. Let's see if we can increase the serotonin, the dopamine, and the GABA so that you can sleep through the night and you're not exhausted all the time. Simple changes can do a lot to increase the effectiveness of the microbiome. But if we switch to Ayurveda, Ayurveda has always talked about, so I'm using microbiome, that's more of a Western terminology, but Ayurveda has always spoken to Agni. And Agni is our digestive fire. And Agni is our ability to digest and transform anything, not just food. And so when our Agni is working well, we are able not only just to digest food, but we're able to digest life. Because that's what, Karen, you talked about the spiritual, the meaning, the spiritual purpose behind it all. Well, the spiritual purpose behind Agni is the ability to transform all of our life's experiences, our emotions, our memories, our experiences, whatever we come in contact with, but it's also our ability to digest food. Simply put, for Western terminology, it's about like that, your digestive system, your microbiome. But Ayurveda has a spiritual background, and so it's also going to say, how well are you digesting your life? Are you digesting your life right now? And what happens in perimenopause and menopause, my own experience has been, and also what I've heard from many women, is that all of our undigested thoughts, memories, and experiences now get triggered and they rise to the surface. And so what we thought perhaps we had a handle on, or what we thought, oh, I've dealt with that. I looked at that. I sat with that. I'm 100% with that. I'm okay. But perimenopause and menopause is the great reckoning. Because we no longer, like I said, we no longer have the security blanket of a well-functioning estrogen. We no longer have our microbiome, or our Agni isn't steady. It isn't working as effectively as it used to be. So now it's almost like, again, I think Imrie mentioned the mask falls off. All of these things are revealed. And so if we look at what was mentioned around the fear, the self-doubt, the anxiety, or the rage, there is this, the way that they phrase it in Ayurveda, and this is more going into doshas, which I could talk for hours about all this, but in Ayurveda, the human body contains 3 doshas, and Vata dosha for women is incredibly important to understand its function and how to work with Vata, because Vata controls the menstrual cycle. For women who are pregnant, Vata dosha is the dosha that controls their experience of labor. Vata dosha is the dosha that controls your experience of perimenopause and menopause. So it's an incredibly important dosha to understand its function and how to treat it when it comes to women's health from the lens of Ayurveda. But when we look at how Ayurveda describes menopause, because traditionally speaking, Ayurveda didn't even recognize perimenopause. So this is more of a modern experience. But when we talk about how Ayurveda looked at the lens of what happens for a woman when she transitions, because Ayurveda does actually see this as an incredibly sacred transition, which is necessary for a woman to actually move into who she truly is. So Ayurveda frames menopause as necessary, sacred, and there is a reverence for it, because this is where this woman moves into, as I think, Karen, you said, the energy, well, we're not losing this energy to our menstrual cycle. This energy is going to go back to us. But this is the energy where we truly we harvest that energy into becoming fully who we are. and in service to others. We become the elders, we become the wise women, we become the leaders of our community. We become those who can actually hold the line, hold the light for, you know, everyone around us, our families, our community, and so forth. But before we get through that, Ayurveda says that vata is set loose throughout the body. And this to me was really interesting. And I only heard this a year ago, and I'm perimenopausal myself. But it was described to me as vata is now set loose throughout your body. And vata is air and movement. And so if you think about that, what happens is you have excess movements now throughout your entire body. You have excess movement in your brain. So that means erratic or irrational thoughts. Maybe you can't control your thoughts. Excess movement in the nervous system, anxiety, self-doubt. Okay, so this is excess movement. Vata is movement. But for me, on the energetic level, this was really interesting because what happened for me personally, this vata setting loose, you know, throughout my body. It wasn't just mentally and emotionally, it was energetically. It was like vata was genuinely set loose in my subconscious. And so everything that had been held down or repressed or was stagnant in my subconscious suddenly became to rise with literally, it was like bubbles. It was this movement of stuff that was stuck in my subconscious rose to the surface of my conscious awareness. So the movement from my subconscious to my conscious awareness was accelerated. And I had to sit with and face, quite frankly, so much about myself that I had up until this stage had not come face to face with. So there was a great, it was incredibly destabling in one component because it was like, where is this coming from? Like memories that I had from 4 years of age, for example. Stuff that happened when I was 8 years of old, 8 years of age. Just different experiences, but more it was this pattern of recognizing energetic patterns that had been around me my entire life that played out through relationships. Just all of it just rose to the surface. And I went, you know what? I thought I had dealt with it. But then Vata dosha comes along, stirs the pot, shakes everything up, everything rises to the surface. And here's the question, am I ready to digest it now? Am I ready? Am I big and bold enough? And have I done the work? Am I stable enough in my sense of self and my soul and my psyche to finally to be able to digest this? Is my Agni strong enough, powerful enough to actually be able to digest this, transform it, put it to bed, so that I can move with this transition and birth something, not drag my past with me, not drag my conditioning with me, not drag the trauma of that 4-year-old, 8-year-old, so forth, not drag that with me, but actually digest it, transform it, and come out on the other side who I was born to be. Not my birth story, but who I was actually born to be.
An unbecoming to become.
Yes. That's menopause. That's menopause. Yeah.
Wow. When you frame it
Mm-hmm.
with the wisdom and the understanding of that sacred intelligence that works in the body, it's a real reclamation of,
Yeah.
I'm ready for this journey.
Yeah.
Of course I am. I'm able for this journey. How could I not be? So in other words, for me to say that again, there's this awareness of knowing I am safe,
Yeah.
regardless of the disturbances. I'm
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah.
because
Mm.
it has me
Yeah.
in the unpacking of me. It has me anyway,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah.
And that's what led me, Rachel, um, and you're bringing up my need to book myself back into you anyway, because I went off, but it put me in my need to do what I did for the year with Imrie, which I've never allowed myself to do, is I sat with women for a year. And I mean, and I'm not in a non-disclosure way, like we stripped naked and would swim in the rivers together. And I get so emotional about that because it was
Mm.
like, looking at it and looking back, it was like I gifted myself to be back in a space where I never felt I belonged when it came to group dynamics. I never felt I belonged. So I was like, I am so capable, but I have to do this not in the insular of my own knowing of my own self in my own isolation. I need to do this in the exposure of the witnessing of others with me, where I'm with them and I have to learn to navigate the dynamic of this with women. And I gifted myself that last year. And the gift of gifting myself that was sleeping in a tent at the side of a fucking forest with no comfort and no food. It brought up terror. It allowed me, my body was ready. It allowed my terror to come up, and terror and memories, like you just said, of things that I had not even, like I would see them in my mind's eye, but I hadn't connected into it in an honest owning, in a visceral, embodied way. And I remember coming out of that journey of the terror, like, I mean, I was even terrified getting outside of the tent to have a pee. There was so much terror at the dark woods. But I remembered after I went through that, I was like looking back, going, wow, that's why I needed to go into this group dynamic, get into the discomfort again of being seen with the collective, getting naked in my own body and not judging my own body, and beginning to look at women, really looking at women's nakedness, going, gosh, every fucking shape of a woman is stunning. Every shape. When a woman is naked in front of you, there is something so beautiful in the witnessing of a feminine's body. I was in awe of my sisters going into the river. And the beauty of the medicine, Imrie, is an elder sister, so she's been in this years. But the wisdom of meeting the water, meeting the air, and allowing your body to communicate to all elements, both in nature and within yourself. Like, it's, my heart goes into a place of pride for women and the gift of what we are. And because of certain lenses, we have no idea of the gift of what we actually are, you know. And I would hope from this incredible conversation, I hope that a little crack in somebody's listening happens where they begin to kind of see themselves more than just their anxiety, the problems that are going on with him, but as an unbecoming into something
Yeah.
truly magnificent. Like I hope that for the listeners. I really do. Really.
Yeah. I just listened to Rachel there and I was thinking, where were you a year and a half ago? You know, I'll be honest, and I'm
You
guilty of
tell you.
Karen told me, Karen kept saying it to me, and I was in denial. And as I'm listening to you and how you described everything and how you broke it down, Rachel, I mean, I have never had it explained to me like that. I never had that understanding. For all my intelligence as a woman, I will say, and my research that I've done myself, it's never been explained to me how you've explained it to me. Just, everything, how you've described the connection with all parts of our body and the way you've broken it down. I was like just transfixed by how you were explaining it, but also at the same time thinking, oh my God, I never knew that. I never knew those things. I never knew the attachment to the journey we were on. I thought I knew myself and I thought I had processed a lot of things. But now as I'm listening to you, I realize I may have stalled some of that progress. I may have put a plaster on some things, and instead of actually facing maybe up to some things, I put a plaster on it, and I moved forward joyfully. But I wonder, at the same time, what didn't I face up to? What did I leave behind that I could have actually had some transformation in? And I think there's power in that. And I think if I could go back now, having listened to you, I think I would have went on that journey first before I took another path. So that's kind of where I'm wondering if somebody's listening now and they're kind of on the fence. Maybe that's the journey, because I'm thinking, look at it's worked out well for me, but as I'm listening to you, I'm really like I'm just so interested in that side of it now. Like just kind of. I don't know. I realized as you were talking, I was going, I could have done that. Why didn't I do it? Because now there's part of me jealous that I didn't get the full experience, even if it was difficult at the time, as crazy as that might sound. When you're talking about transformation, I wonder, did I, miss out on some of that transformation? Is that we find ourselves on the other side? Now, and to be fair, Karen will know this. I've had to meet myself on many other sides in my lifetime through many different reasons. So maybe that was it. Maybe I was just too tired of meeting myself in so many different other sides, because I've had to get through so many obstacles that maybe it was okay this time to take the plaster, in this case. But I am definitely so interested in what you have to say, and I just think it's fascinating and just yeah, I just think it's beautiful as well because you've lifted a fear of what that is. That's what you've done for me. That I'm like, wow, I had a scary idea in my head and I kept thinking, I won't keep getting through this. It's going to be too difficult if I don't take something to help me get through it. But as I'm listening to you, it's like that fear around it doesn't feel fearful. It feels like this could be something massively transformative. And I think of Imrie, you did the work, you went on the courses, you did I believe you did really face up to those things and you did a really deep dive, so while I know you took like HRT like me, but I think that you really, really went deeper and did the work as well. Whereas I think I may have after a few months went, help me out here now. Just put an end to this. I'm not willing to keep going. So, but I do think, Rachel, thank you for that incredible information. I think so many people, I did not know anything about those things. When I think about it, I had an ulcer, I had Helicobacter bacteria in my stomach, I had many things going on with my gut, and I had mold toxicity from years ago that I had to bind out my body for a number of years. So no, I'm now, having listened to you, it makes complete sense why I would have hit severe perimenopause, even if the chemist or the doctor was saying you shouldn't be really feeling too much of it right now at this stage, because they just go by graphs and numbers or whatever. Now, they were amazing, don't get me wrong as well. But at the same time, that's why when I'm listening to you, so my microbiome, my gut, and now my husband has me on the peptides, so to rebuild my stomach. So he's amazing. He's done all that research.
Before I jump in, I would love, Anne-Marie's lovely reflection on, her, what she's heard as well from you, Rachel. And, just to say, Angela, you hit the beautiful teaching in all of this you know, is that it tells us like there's nothing wrong with us. Like there's nothing wrong with us. When we are going through the anxiety and the restless sleeps and all of that, it's not because there's something wrong with us, because that's something we're so conditioned to do, is turn that energy and blame and shame the self again and punish the self in our way of looking at it, because we're so focused on it must be an ish thing, it must be a me thing. But it's not. It's the body communicating with us in its best way. It knows how to communicate, telling us, hey, this is off, but there's nothing wrong with us. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. You named it, so I just wanted to illuminate and magnify it. Anne-Marie, I'd love to hear where you're at, darling, before we do come together in a closing. Where are you?
Hi, thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing so much. It's beautiful to hear, and I agree with, I know a little bit about Ayurveda, but I wouldn't know, I wouldn't be an expert in that at all. But it correlates with what I've learned through my own experience and through the courses, in that menopause is actually a calling. It's like there was a calling, that comes with menopause. I think everything gets stripped back so that we can really deal with what we haven't dealt with, or what we might have thought we dealt with in the past. And even though I have taken HRT for the last couple of years, I can honestly say it hasn't gotten me out scot-free from this. Do you know? I've still felt, the energy of perimenopause and menopause, and our HRT wasn't the miracle thing that it has been for other people. It helped, but it certainly didn't. It wasn't a cure-all for me anyway. I think that we're meant to go through it. I think that that mask being stripped away allowed me to really see what was going on in my life and what I maybe hadn't dealt with and that I did need to deal with within myself. I had to go through that journey, and I think to some degree we all have to go through that journey. I think it is an evolution into our wise years, and the languaging that helped me was the languaging around the different phases, which, and I'll just say them because I think that's helpful. The first phase, and they're not linear, it's more of a dance that happens between these different phases. Sometimes you can be in a few different phases at the same time. But what helped me was the first phase is betrayal, and that gave me a language to actually name what I was feeling at the time. Was, oh my God, this is betrayal. And it allowed me to meet the grief and the shame and the confusion that came up with it. But from betrayal, we come into the phase of repair, which is where we need this deep rest. And if I could go back and, like, I don't know if I could have changed anything because, my kids were teenagers. I was self-employed. I'm still self-employed. My father was sick. There was so much going on. Could I have taken the rest that I needed? The answer is probably still no. I couldn't take the rest and the space that I really needed, but that's what my body was yearning for. And I am better at taking that now because I have more space to take that. But yeah, repair, the next phase, really, really important. And then when you have that rest, we come into the phase of revelation. This is where we start to kind of maybe little parts of it. The lights come back on. Somebody said that about the lights coming back on. It's like, oh, okay, there's something sparking here, do you know? It's like before that, we're in a total space of mush. And then from revelation comes visioning. And I can't say that I'm fully in this phase yet, but I'm getting glimpses of it. It's like, oh, okay, I'm having a little bit of a more of an insight into who I am and who I'm becoming. And there's so much power there. And I don't mean power in a really unhealthy way. It's like this inner power and this wisdom that I can tangibly sense within myself. And then the final phase is emergence. And like I said, this is not a linear thing. It is a bit of a dance. Sometimes I'm in repair, sometimes I'm feeling revelation, and then I'm back in betrayal. And I'm like, what? So that has been the language that has helped me sort of navigate this. And I think it correlates with what you describe as happening with the Vata and everything that's coming up. And I think we're meant to go through this. This is an evolution into our wise years. It's a spiritual evolution. And like sometimes, now this is maybe a little bit controversial to say, but because I don't feel that this menopause, which is, I believe, a rite of passage, one of the biggest rites of passage that we can actually go through in our lifetime, because it's not honored, or it hasn't been honored in our culture. It is in other cultures. When you reach the age of 52, you are considered to be an elder. I think that what happens for some women, they have this amazing power within them, this wisdom that's within them, and they're not seen, they're not respected, they are disregarded, they do not have a voice in our modern world. Well, maybe they do, but it kind of feels like sometimes that they don't. And I think sometimes people become a little bit bitter and they get old rather than becoming the elder that they actually are. So that's kind of what I want to say, I think.
Oh, Imrie, thank you for the passion and the mighty power of the spirit behind the words. Like, honestly, thank you. And that's one thing I do recognize. And that's what I was saying a little earlier. Like, I feel a little bit kind of blessed that my conditions in my environments were very complementary to the perimenopausal symptoms, like I was saying, the new relationship and my kids being older. When you speak about rest and repair, I had a lot of that. And working for myself, I can gift myself that. But one of the biggest transitions out of that I've recognized is I used to have a love of power, make it, get out there, become something. And that's gone. And now I have more of a realization of the power of love. I am so impacted by the power of love, that I get very emotional when I'm in environments that are loving. I'm so receptive to love. And that's probably now the anchoring of the place in which all intentions in me arise from, is that, you know, the power of love rather than the love of acquiring power. Rachel, and I leave Angela is going to beautifully close us, but we'd love just maybe, you know, if you want to say, you know, whatever you want to say, your last words, darling. I'd love to hear.
Again, I find this difficult to sum up or to qualify, because for me, perimenopause, menopause, there's so much into it. Just as in Karen, you mentioned earlier, there's so much more to the menstrual cycle than we are ever taught. The menstrual cycle itself is designed for transformation. The menstrual cycle itself is a shamanic practice in and of itself. We are not taught this. We are not, from my experience and what I've seen, we're not given the opportunity to live in such a way. There's not reverence for the shamanic, esoteric purpose of the menstrual cycle and the transition of perimenopause to menopause. So this is why I find it difficult to sum it up, because I just think there's so much more to it. That the female body is just perfectly designed for our spiritual becoming. I've experienced that. I feel that. That's the way that I base all my work on, is that this female body, it's not against us. Quite the opposite. It is perfectly designed to give us all the information that we need to spiritually become, like I was saying, who we were born to be. So if we were to actually lean into menopause as thinking of it, or maybe feeling into it as that moving into, if you like, as a second birth canal. To me, the first birth canal was when we entered into this world, and there's that birth story that gets attached to that. And then there's the childhood and our teenage years. And there's all those life experiences and everything that we had to confront and come up against. And if you are so inclined, if karma is a word you're so inclined towards, there's the karma that has to be met. And that has so much to do with our birth story and even the parents that we're born to. So that's our first birth experience. But then menopause comes along and offers us the chance to re-enter the birth canal, but this time of our own conscious choosing. But this time to actually enter the birth canal so that all that came before can be stripped away from us, that we are not trapped by that conditioning or the past or the roles that we had to play or who we thought we had to be, that we can actually strip all of that back, that we can move through this second birth canal and rebirth ourselves as who we truly are. So this to me is really how I wish perimenopause and menopause was framed as, first and foremost. Your body's not against you. Your body is not failing you. Your body is trying to do everything that it can to afford you this opportunity to actually be able to birth yourself who you truly are in this lifetime. And so for me, menopause is that opportunity that I don't have to carry the weight of my past into the second half of my life. I don't have to drag that baggage into the second half of my life. I can step through this portal. I can step through this gate. I can be fully Rachel, raw, vulnerable, authentic. I can step into truly who I am, not defined at all by my past. And that to me is the one thing that I would just love to get across to all women. This is your opportunity. You were built for this. You were designed for this. We are so much more than, and perimenopause, menopause, the menstrual cycle, it's just so much more than we've ever been taught. We are sacred beings, and our body is giving us this sacred opportunity.
Wow. Yeah, powerful. Absolutely powerful. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was just incredible. And Anne-Marie, yeah, I'm just in awe. I now know why Karen has connected with you because you're absolutely incredible, the two of you, and I could listen to you all day. We have been here a while, and Rachel, obviously, Karen said you have some guests as well. So we will close this conversation, but I just want to take a moment to honor you, the woman that's listening now. If anything shared today resonated, stirred something, or brought emotion to the surface, know this: there is nothing wrong with you. Perimenopause is not a failure of the body, it's a conversation the body is asking you to enter. It's an invitation to slow down, to listen differently, to release old expectations, and to meet yourself with more compassion, honesty, and reverence. You are not losing yourself in this season. You are being asked to come home to yourself with clearer boundaries, deeper intuition, and a truer sense of what matters now. If this episode offered you language, relief, understanding, or even just a feeling of I'm not alone, then it has done its work. We want to thank our beautiful guests, Anne-Marie Southcombe and Rachel Jackson, for bringing their wisdom, presence, and insight into this space, and for helping us hold this conversation with such care and integrity. And to you listening, be gentle with your body. Be curious rather than critical, and trust that your body is not betraying you. It is guiding you. Thank you for being here with us on Pink is Power. Until next time, take good care of yourself, body, heart, and soul.
Yay! Bye.